President Obama sat down with Frontline at PBS to talk about why it appears that we will be headed to Damascus.
First of all, I have not made a decision. I have gotten options from our military. I had extensive discussions with my national security team. What I've also concluded is that direct military engagement, involvement in a civil war in Syria would not help the situation on the ground. And so we've been very restrained. But what I also said was that if the Assad regime used chemical weapons on his own people, that would change some of our calculations.
So now that's PBS NewsHour, obviously. And so what the president is saying there is, as usual, I haven't made the decision yet, but obviously we're going to go. And before I was against it, but now I'm in favor of it because they use chemical weapons. Now, look, it is fair to say that chemical weapons did change the equation. So it's okay to adjust to new facts on the ground. So what else does the president have?
We have concluded that the Syrian government, in fact, carry these out. And if that's so, then there need to be international consequences.
Now, he says we have concluded that the Syrian government has carried this out. Hold, because not necessarily. I'm going to get to that in a second. One more from the president.
Again, I have not made a decision, but I think it's important that if, in fact, we make a choice to have repercussions for the use of chemical weapons, then the Assad regime, which is involved in a civil war, trying to protect itself, will have received a pretty strong signal that, in fact, it better not do it again.
Better not do it again. So, and that's the essence of the goal here, which is to send a signal not just to the Assad regime, but to the whole world. You're not allowed to use weapons of mass destruction like chemical weapons. If you do, there's going to be consequences. Now, here's one of the problems. It appears that we're not absolutely clear that the Assad regime did use chemical weapons. Now, there are reports out that it's possible that rebel groups could have taken control of chemical weapon stores at some point. It's not to say they did. It's just to say that it is possible. It has not been ruled out. Now, also, we have intercepted a call about the use of chemical weapons from the regime side, but that call was low-level officers. It did not trace back to senior-level military officers or to Assad. So that's another important question. So now you remember, of course, when we took military action in the Middle East last time without enough evidence, that didn't turn out that well. Well, now we have intelligence officials telling the papers that it is, quote, it's not a slam dunk. Uh-oh. Now, here's more from the Associated Press. While Secretary of State John Kerry said Monday that it was undeniable a chemical weapons attack had occurred and that it was carried out by the Syrian military, U.S. intelligence officials are not so certain that the suspected chemical attack was carried out on Assad's orders, or even completely sure it was carried out by government forces. Oops. That's U.S. intelligence officials. We're not at all sure. Look, it's embarrassing to say, to indicate like we're gonna go, and then to put the brakes on it. You know what's more embarrassing? If we go and it turns out it wasn't the Assad regime that used chemical weapons. And by the way, if the rebels used the chemical weapons, would we then have to turn around and bomb them? Those are very, very difficult questions. Let's get all the evidence before we act, please. But I'm not sure that's the way it's going to go down. Now, here's Secretary of State John Kerry. He said, we know that the Syrian regime maintains custody of these chemical weapons. We know that the Syrian regime has the capacity to do this with rockets. We know that the regime has been determined to clear the opposition from those very places where the attacks took place. I read that quote and I thought, uh-oh, we don't have it. We don't have the evidence. This sounds like Iraq all over again. We know that Saddam Hussein at some point had the capacity for weapons of mass destruction, and we know that Saddam Hussein is a really bad guy who wouldn't mind using them. Wait. None of what John Kerry said there indicated that Assad actually used the weapons. We know he has the capacity. We know he'd like to wipe out the opposition forces. And so far, the U.S. government has not presented any evidence, not only not to the public, but to the United Nations or even to Congress, saying what evidence we have that Assad's regime in this last attack did the attack directly. That's a big, big problem. Now, Mary Harf, State Department Deputy Spokesperson, also said this, quote, "We ultimately, of course, hold President Assad responsible for the use of chemical weapons by his regime against his own people, regardless of where the command and control lies. That was another big red flag for me. In other words, we don't know who ordered it. We don't know where command and control lies, but we're just generally going to say it was the Assad regime. I'm not sure that's good enough.